We are excited to welcome our next guests, Philipp Klein and Ray Jacobs, who came all the way from Berlin to join us today. They are part of Ape Unit, a brilliant web development and design studio. The stage is yours, guys.
Yes, hello. Hi.
Hello. Nice.
Wow, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Philipp. I'm a developer.
I'm Ray. I'm a UX UI designer.
And we work for Ape Unit. We are a digital agency based in Berlin. And my job at Ape Unit is to create blockchain applications, conceptualize applications, help onboard new developers, new designers, and try to get the bigger picture from a development perspective.
And we closely work together, grabbing his technical solutions, and I try to create a great user experience and build a nice app or digital product.
Yeah. So the topic of this talk is bridging the gap. And the goal is that we want to get you a little bit into the mindset of how we try to create awareness for designers and developers about UI and UX problems in blockchain and decentralized applications. And we would also like to share how we approach this, what I just said, for the Eternity blockchain. So, I have to see how this works. Cool. So, our mission for Eternity is to make it more accessible and boost the mass adaptation of the core technology. And we make that. We try to achieve that by making usable and understandable decentralized applications, and that's what we consider bridging the gap. And our approach is that we try to identify the problems of our stakeholders, and by stakeholders in that sense we mean actually developers and end users, because the whole process starts with making the developers first understand actually what are the UI and UX problems in blockchain applications, and then and the designers, and help them come up with processes that educate also the users and help them understand what they're actually doing, right? Can I just ask a question, like, who's a developer, who's a designer here? Who's developer? Okay, designers here? Wow, cool. I like you. Who has built a decentralized application, a blockchain application before, written a smart contract or any of those things? Okay, cool, not so many people. So I'm
going to walk you through the index. I'm going to explain a bit more how we perceive this gap and the position we're at this moment. We're facing a lot of paradigms between old systems like centralized services and decentralized services, and what kind of terminology we're facing. What's always at the center of our product is the road, the user road. I'm still at it.
Oh, sorry.
This bumpy road the user is going through at this moment, and our approaches, our solutions for eternity. So what is the gap exactly? Like, as Philipp mentioned before, blockchain systems are not that accessible for users, not so understandable. And for instance, users need wallets, tokens, exchanges, accounts, and stuff like that, whereas until now people can just create an account with an email address, get a password, and carry on. So on top of that, they need to handle or know what a private key is, what a public key is. But in the end, a user just wants to have a smooth service and get to his goal with as least clicks as possible, of course.
Yeah, I think it's really about that as a developer in the blockchain space, you get really in this like tunnel, and you think, yeah, of course they want to put their public key there in their account, and they want to have tokens and all this stuff. But these are just assumptions, no? Like if you would give a blockchain-enabled application to your parents, they probably would just want to get the service out of it in the end. No?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, the gap is actually quite big, of course. It's everything that stands between a good technical solution and a smooth, good user experience at this point.
Furthermore, I think it also stands in between making the designers and developers already, understand actually how the systems work and what are the implications when you implement them. It's also some kind of a gap right?
Yeah, and we're actually in this gap, in this shifting paradigms. And a question we're always asking ourselves every day, like how to react, what are our responsibilities, and what are our challenges and chances, for instance.
So I think in decentralized applications, there's a lot of new paradigms and new words and metaphors and all this stuff that we have to get used to, and we have to educate users about. And we just now identified the four most prominent ones that we are facing on a daily basis when we are onboarding new developers, designers, or trying to make users understand what we're actually doing, or explaining it just to like some kind of startup that just wants to know how to use blockchain, you know. So I think the biggest shift in paradigms is the financial paradigm, that we are used to having free services, and now we have to pay for everything all of a sudden, right? Because you have the gas fee on the blockchain, and you have to pay for that when you want to change something. So the other one is ownership. In the current systems, in the platforms, these platform capitalist systems, we're actually not the owners of our data. We create profiles, we upload files, we communicate with people, but in the end, the platforms, they own the data, they decide what they're going to do with it and how they rearrange and redistribute this information. And in these new systems, the user would be more in charge of it, hopefully completely be in charge of it. Then also talking about responsibility, currently I can do whatever I want in these platforms. They had 20 years of development time to develop patterns of how to help me not screw it up. And in current designs and implementations of blockchain systems, the user is fully responsible for his actions. Then also we have, we're talking a bit of a language terminology and metaphors. There's a lot of words that we got used to in the past 20 years, and they are not really that valid anymore for this kind of systems. So let's talk about the free versus the paid system. The user might just say, like, I just want to use the service. Why do I all of a sudden need to pay for that? If I open an app or like an app, a decentralized application, it's pretty much asking me to have tokens right from the beginning to pay for all this transactions. But actually, as a user, I want to have a trial period. I want to have a money-back guarantee, and I want to choose a flat rate plan because that's what I was taught in the past 20 years that I need to have. So, but this, because the blockchain applications make you pay for everything, we're facing this problem of how to create frictionless interaction with the user. The question is, how can we find a pattern that convinces first-time users to pay right away? Or can we find a technical pattern of facilitating a use now and pay later kind of service, which would also have to influence how blockchains work fundamentally from its core, or at least create a lot of systems around it that are trying to achieve that. So if we're talking about ownership in the walled gardens of the current platforms, a user might say, if I want to use another app that does something similar in a slightly different way than one that I'm already used to, like, I haven't used the service yet, how can I migrate my data? If you want to go get started with a new file sharing thing and you have all your stuff in Dropbox, you're like a little bit tired and exhausted to migrate it, even if the other plan seems more, the other service seems a little bit more reasonable. So but the deal is in decentralized applications, the idea is that you're really the owner of your data. And every kind of new service can come along and plug into that data that you already provided. So the question is, like, how can we also make users understand that? Because I think the biggest challenge is that, not the technical one, the biggest challenge will be to make people really understand that. If they used app A and it did something in a certain way, I can just migrate to app B, which was created by a completely different developer, and use the same data. I think people have this walled gardens in their head already. Then let's talk about the responsibility pattern. If I am in control of my data and everything is secured in a cryptographic way, I have a huge responsibility to deal with my sensitive information. I have to back up my private keys. I have to make sure nobody knows about them. I have to even understand what's the difference between a public and a private key. And the problem is that I think most users, they don't really want to know anything about it. They don't want to deal with like hex strings and yeah, mining and block time and transactions and all that stuff. They actually want to just use a service. They expect refunds and resets and reverts and recovery. So can we find patterns that we either teach the people that these things are not going to happen anymore, or can we find technical solutions of how we give them the access to their own data, we give them the whole responsibility, but somehow create a layer in between where we protect them from the catastrophes. And then, last but not least, we have this paradigm of language, terminology, metaphor, which Ray's going to talk about.
Yeah, that's the part I'm mostly interested in. It's like also the technical understanding, but it's already also really important to keep it as short and simple as possible. The user don't want to deal with, should we call a transaction, or do we call it an account or a wallet? Users are used to having a password, but you don't have a password, we're talking about keys. So the terminology, how you frame it is really, really important, because educating users is new concepts is the most hardest thing to do. For instance, the wallet, we're now calling it a wallet, but is it still a wallet when it's holding 6 months of your salary? Because you're not walking down the street with a wallet with thousands of euros in it, for instance. These questions. And then we go to the user, to the bumpy road of the user. I think it's really important to keep the user as central as possible. The one thing is, of course, to introduce your user to an app. Still really happy to download it, but then again, the next step is, of course, download the app in wallet, but then he needs to claim a public key. It's getting more complicated. Then you need to have a recovery phrase. You need to write it down. You need to back it up. You need to get tokens. You need to register at an exchange. You do some sort of a KYC. Why? Trading, transferring? No, the user just wants to use his service. He's now quite frustrating, and our challenge is to make it as smooth as possible. And how are we doing it? We have a couple of approaches. In my opinion, as a designer, UI is the first touch point. So what we did, we created a set of components, UI components, which looks good, of course, but also should be able to display difficult content, such as addresses, accounts, and stuff like that. So we made them all available at components.apps.com. They're built in Vue.js, so not only for designers, but also for developers. They're really, we make it really easy to get them on board, to create a new app himself. So this was also like a design we thought about. We're dealing with a card, with an account, and an account holds money. So our challenge was, okay, how can we display it as simple as possible? Everybody has a card. Everybody knows that you can pay with a card. So this was our representation of an account on the blockchain. So I
think it's just some examples of how it would look if we use these components in different applications.
Yeah, but also like the first use case you have here on the left is, for instance, how to write down your mnemonic phrase, how to make it as playful and understandable as possible. On the right, you have your account with your accounts cards and your list of transactions, for instance. How can you share your account? We created a QR code that somebody just can scan it instead of this public key to write it down, of course. How do you transfer? How do you have a clear overview of what your transaction means? Where is it going? And another problem, of course, we had the governance model. I think Emin is going to talk about it later. How can we display how the votes are being delegated in a proper overview, which is understandable for a first-time user as well?
Yeah, like I said before, the whole gap between creating a good user experience and a good technical solution also starts with the developers. So what we also do is we create developer tools to help developers get started with Eternity. We create a smart contract editor for the new Sophia smart contract language. And of course, we also use our app components there. We write tutorials and link these resources all together. We create a blockchain explorer that also uses the same design language and hopefully integrates well into the contract editor. But we also create SDKs and libraries for JavaScript developers and for Python developers. The idea is always, when we develop this kind of libraries, we try to think about the developer that just got started. He would just onboard himself into blockchain, into Eternity, and decentralized applications. So how can we make it as easy and as straightforward as possible that also the way you use the library is actually like a story, setting it up, transacting with something, and connecting between apps and wallets. We also create example contracts in the new Sophia smart contract language. So new developers can just derive them and adjust them to their own business model. All the documentation and the tutorials are available on dev.apps.com. And yeah, I urge you to check them out.
Oh, yeah. Just a screen.
Just a screenshot of those things. No?
So to wrap it up, you have like a lot of focus points. If you're building a decentralized app, you have UI designers, UX designers, developers, users, of course, and their problems and challenges. The paradigms we talked about and the concepts that coming out of it. Our main thing is actually that you do not see them as single focus points, but create one big focus and don't forget any of those.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, a small thing. We're setting up a beta testing program as well. It would be great if you all sign up, that you can click through new concepts. Then we get like a lot of new information, work iterative, and make our products even better.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you. So I think we can open for questions now. Anything?
Hello, first of all, great presentation. I have two questions. My first question, for example, if you have Angular or React application, do you have any problem to make connection with your components, with Vue.js components?
We haven't used neither React nor Angular for creating applications for Eternity yet, but I think you can adopt the same interface language and the same structure of components and just create a similar component library on top of React and Angular. And I think there's also a project coming up that we have looked into. I just forgot the name. It's from the, I don't know, can somebody here from, Emil, do you know it? The paper CH guys told us about it.
Stencil? No?
Ionic,
Oh,
there's an approach in the Ionic framework to create framework agnostic components. There's an approach that is currently being developed by the Ionic framework, so we looked into it and we're thinking about shifting there, that our components could work with Angular, React, you name it, all of those, hopefully.
Okay, and my second question, where I can find the presentation and the slides?
We can upload it later.
We can make it public.
Is it maybe available? Is there like a website for the BlackSeaChain? We can upload it? More questions? I mean, come on, you're developers, you want to create distributed, decentralized applications, and you must have a ton of questions. Okay, so.
All right.
Then I think that's it. No more
Then
questions.
we're done. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.